Whitaker Weekly is a 3-episode anime discussion podcast where two brothers discuss a show of their choice. The show can be anything from a current season flop to a decades-old classic. What are they going to talk about next? Who knows? They sure don't. And this is Whitaker Weekly. Let's get right into it.
All right. So first thing on the news on our docket today is Fathom Events. We're doing a recap. Fathom Events is taking on Krull this month.
Fathom Events isn't doing it. It's
the
RiffTrax.
Fathom Events is presenting RiffTrax taking on Krull.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who don't know, RiffTrax is what happened to MST3K.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
So it's just a couple of guys that spend their time making fun of movies while they watch them live.
And I have been to several live RiffTrax performances. I've been to Samurai Cop. I've been to... I forget what the name of the show is, but there's a Halloween movie that's like a cult classic that was filmed here in Utah.
Uh-huh.
They did a live performance of that. I went to their Mothra performance. All of them comic gold. So funny. I'm very excited to go see Krull live in theaters as well. For those of you who don't know what Krull is, it is an 80s sci-fi fantasy movie that's as bad as it sounds. Okay?
Yeah, it was just one of those market saturation things that happened after Star Wars. Everybody was trying to do something science fantasy. Studios were filling the market with it. And this one happens to have both Robbie Coltrane and Liam Neeson as background characters. That's how old this movie is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, we grew up watching it. We love it. But, I will... hardly agree with anybody who says that it's a bad movie, because it is. It's a bad movie, but it's a bad movie that we enjoy. So, anyways, so that's it for
that bit.
For that bit. Next we have I didn't get the name of the studio, unfortunately, but there's a studio that's been producing CGI Godzilla movies, and it was going to be a trilogy. And the second one just released last month. And the third one has a release date now of November 9th, and you can go ahead and watch them on Netflix.
Oh, you put them out pretty quickly then.
Yep, they're putting them out pretty quickly. You can watch the first two on Netflix. It's Godzilla, A Planet of Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the second one is called, but the third one is called... let me go ahead and pull it up here. The third one is called Godzilla, the Planet Eater. So...
Wow.
Yep. Godzilla the Planet Eater.
All right, and we'll have a link to that on our website.
Mm-hmm. And then for the last bit of news, this year is the 25th anniversary of the anime release for Yu Yu Hakusho.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been that long.
Doesn't that make you feel old?
I do feel old.
Mm-hmm. But part of the celebration for it is that they are releasing a new OVA series.
Yeah.
And they've released stills of the characters for the OVA. That's going to be released later on this year.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have a link for that for you guys to go ahead and take a look at those images as well. But is there any other news that you wanted to cover?
No, that covers it for me.
All right. Well,
just a quick reminder, I didn't actually mention it, but the RiffTrax event with Fathom Events is August 23rd live, and then August 25th will be an encore presentation where they just rebroadcast what they had done before.
Mm-hmm.
So go and catch it.
Yeah, it's very much worth the price of admission. Okay, so now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and get to the meat of the podcast. 3 episodes in.
And what are we reviewing this week?
This week we are watching or reviewing Violet Evergarden. It's one of the latest shows from Kyoto Animation.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who's familiar with their animation style will be able to just pick it off right off the bat.
Yeah.
But it's on Netflix, so this started airing earlier this year. I believe it was January when it started airing.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong about that, but it was earlier this year when it started airing. But because Netflix got the rights to it, I couldn't watch it here legally in the States until Netflix had it all. It had all been released, and then they went ahead and posted it on Netflix.
Right.
Because that's just what they do. But anyways, let's go ahead and just get into it. So here's the synopsis. This is from Netflix. The war is over, and Violet Evergarden needs a job. Scarred and emotionless, she takes a job as a letter writer to understand herself and her past. And that's a very, very bare bones synopsis.
Yeah. Netflix isn't known for having a robust synopses for anything. They're usually just a couple lines, enough to see it get a flavor for it on the screen. We're fortunate that Crunchyroll and other streaming services have extensive details on certain series. But Netflix, their service is literally, here's the video. You can start watching it now.
Yeah. And that's fine. That's what Netflix does. I just, anyway, I think I'd be more satisfied if Netflix got rights to more older anime.
Sure.
As opposed to services where they very much try to keep up to date and like show you the episodes as they're coming out.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. But like I was saying, that's just, I was just trying to say that's a very, very bare bones synopsis for what's so far proven to be a very in-depth, character-driven story. We both just wrote notes about some amazing stuff that we were both very, very impressed with this show.
We did.
So let's go ahead and just get into it. The show starts off with two people in uniform. Mm-hmm. And
they're walking down the street
walking down the street in the evening, walking down a business district in the evening. They're both in uniform. We see the girl who's going to be Violet. She stops and she's looking at something, and then the man who's with her realizes she's not following. He turns around and says, "Violet," and she says, "Oh, it caught my eye. It looks like your eyes." And it's this beautiful emerald brooch, like an emerald that's like larger than my thumb.
Oh yeah, it's got to be 2 inches tall by 1 inch wide, and it's just gleaming.
Yeah, it's
huge.
It's a gorgeous gemstone. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing we see after that is her waking up in the hospital.
Yeah.
With her hands bandaged and everything.
So at the beginning, we're not really told whether this is a flash forward or a flash back, and we're just piecing together things at this stage. Mm-hmm. Now, we kind of assume it's a flash forward because if they were in uniform and they're soldiers and then they have bandages, odds are.
Yeah, I mean, like. Yeah, the opening shot, like, they're in uniform, and then the very next shot, she's in a hospital in bandages. To me, that cemented that happened. The opening scene was in the past, and this is now the now.
But it could be going either way, and it's kind of in the middle of a relationship that is going to happen, or the middle of a relationship that has transpired. And the question is, which is it? And so that's just another bit of show don't tell intrigue where they're trying to keep you involved.
And that's something that I really, really enjoyed about just the first 3 episodes that we watched so far. Like, we talked about this last week when we were talking about what did we watch last week? It was Sound Euphonium.
Yes. Which I finished the first season this week.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm already in season 2, so but you're watching it with your daughter, so
no, they sometimes appear.
Oh, your daughter is sometimes there?
I'd like her to watch it, but no, she's
at that age where she wants to be playing with her friends.
That's part of it. The other part is that she actually has to complete and turn in a book report before she can apply for her classes this next year.
Oh, nice.
And she hasn't opened the book yet.
Well, then she better get to opening the book. Anyways, this show does an even better job of showing, not telling. She is she's writing a letter to the Major as she addresses him, and that's obviously the man that she was with at the very beginning, and she's writing him a letter talking about her recovery and how she says that I'm now more fit than ever to return to service. Can you please tell me what you want me to do? Pretty much. But as she's doing that, her hand starts shaking and the pen flies out of her hand.
Yeah, she starts talking about... apparently she was in recovery in the hospital for 4 months. They say 120 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, 4 months of recovery.
Mm-hmm. And when she... after she writes the letter, we get this very artistic shot of the paper getting blown away by the wind. The letter she was writing getting blown away by the wind, and just flying through the countryside and through a city and stuff like that, kind of establishing an opening shot of the world. It's a very beautiful, detailed shot.
It really is. What I understand is that the studio managed to get their hands on some cutting edge technology for creating anime, so they were able to produce this stuff that looks like hand drawn, that takes weeks and weeks and months to do, much quicker. And so they're able to produce like the visual style of this entire anime is a cut above what we're used to.
Oh, the entire show is just gorgeous to look at.
And
it's phenomenal.
And so my understanding is that they got new technology that allowed them to do more with the time that they had.
Okay. Well,
and it's an amazing studio doing it.
So
they put out amazing work.
Yeah. I would say they're like Bones. Bones either does amazing stuff or crap. And I'd say the same thing with Kyoto Animation. They either do something that's phenomenal and it pushes, the envelope for anime, or it's just garbage. So, yeah.
Well, no studio's going to hit 100%.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Unless you're Pixar.
Mm-hmm. No. Cars 2.
Cars 2 was a financial success, even if it wasn't critically acclaimed.
Yeah, that being said, everything else has been critically acclaimed and a financial success. Also, I remember Doug, our brother, once told us that the entire reason Pixar made Cars 2 was so that kids would have other lines to quote for their poor parents who were sick and tired of hearing lines from Cars 1.
Oh boy.
Anyways, so she after we see that shot, it cuts back to her it cuts to a red-headed man who's coming into the hospital.
Yes.
Who's revealed to be Lieutenant Colonel Hodgins.
Yes.
And Hodgins, he goes in and he's talking to this nurse, and he starts giving some backstory, some inner monologue and stuff, and he says that people who saw her said that she looked just like a doll, and they weren't able to tell her from she never showed emotions, her face was always the same. Obviously talking about Violet.
Yes. And
we see this shot where he looks over at this porcelain doll by a lamp, and he's a former soldier.
Yeah. So he has a PTSD flashback.
He has a PTSD flashback where this porcelain doll's hands are just covered in blood, and then we cut to a shot he sees Violet from behind, and her uniform is in tatters, and her arms are just covered in the blood of probably her and her enemies.
Yes. And there's just it's a dark shot with bodies strewn about, and she's the lone survivor. Doing some heavy breathing in that shot. But
anyways, he then gets pulled back in, and they go up to Violet's room, and that's when they hear Violet fall from the bed, because she's trying to get the pen so she can go ahead and write a letter and give a report to the major.
Yes.
And Lieutenant Colonel comes in, and she doesn't recognize him at first, but eventually does, and then she stands up like a soldier and immediately gets into her soldier
and it was during
act.
It was
not
during
act, but mannerisms.
Yes, she behaves with proper soldier etiquette.
Yep.
Standing up, saluting a superior officer, standing at attention, apologizing for her disregard of his rank beforehand, and then it was during that scene that I really noticed their eyes.
Yeah.
And I noticed it a bit before, but it was really during that scene that they were actually starting to get close-ups on their eyes. And just the level of detail that they put into the characters' eyes in this anime is so mind-blowing. Just the richness of the colors. Mm-hmm. It's just it's amazing. It is worth watching just for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, the details in the eyes are really, really incredible. But the thing that really got me in this scene is they get Violet back on her bed, and she starts asking questions about where's the Major? Why hasn't he come to see me? And every single time she brings up the Major, or she's talking about how she wants to go back to service, she's ready for service. Hodgins is about to say something, and the nurse cuts him off, and then Violet once again iterates, well, when can I see the Major? Where is he? We get a close-up on Hodgins' hand in his pocket, and we see his hand kind of tighten inside the pocket. You don't see the hand itself, but you see like the movement inside the pocket.
Yeah, it's a extreme close-up on the hand in the pocket. And so our attention is drawn to it, but clearly she doesn't see it.
Yeah. Because she doesn't know how to read people.
No, yeah.
We'll get more into that later. But she doesn't know how to read people, and it's very, very obvious to the audience that something horrible has happened to the Major. Either he's dead, missing in action, we don't really know. We just know that, something horrible has happened to the Major.
And they're not saying what.
Probably because they might not know.
And the nurse, it's possible. But they're not. They seem to be very concerned about Violet's well-being and letting her know the possibility that the Major didn't survive. They seem to be protecting her from a horrible truth. Whether it's true or not, they haven't verified. In the first 3 episodes, they haven't verified the ultimate consequences of what's happened.
But anyways, we see. She. Anyways.
It's really the nurse who starts off the lie about the Major.
She doesn't really say anything about the Major. She just changes the subject real fast.
Yeah.
So, which again makes it more awkward for Hodgins when she gets asked again, or when she asks him. Violet asks Hodgins about the Major, but then he just says that he's left you in my care. So I want you to come with me, and they go off and they. Lost my frame of thought again.
They go on a trip. They're in the back seat of a car. I want to say it was a motor vehicle, but I'm not 100% sure whether it was horse-drawn or motor vehicle, because something comes up later where they're talking about somebody who is planning on mass-producing cars. So that's kind of the time frame.
Yeah,
they have steamers and they have motorcycles, but they don't really have mass-produced cars yet.
Or they do, and he's just looking into going into business for himself doing that thing.
Sure. Anyway. Okay, so there's a scene that takes place inside the back of this car, and they're talking, and
the doll.
The doll. And so before that, before they get in the car, she is given her belongings had been sent to an army base that she wasn't at, and then they eventually got sent back to her, and that's why it took 4 months to get her stuff back to her, just in time for her to leave. And she goes through her suitcase and says, "Where is it? Where's the brooch?"
Referring to the brooch we saw at the beginning of the show.
Yes. And so clearly, laying to rest that yes, that is a flashback. That chronologically, that is when that happened. And so she's very insistent on leaving to go and find this brooch. When the Major stops her and says, "If it's that important to you, I will track it down." Not the Major, the Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel Hodgins.
Hodgins. Hodgins has a and then they get in the backseat of the car, and then he says, "I didn't know which one to get for you," and so he holds up these 3 plushies and says, "I didn't know which one to get for you, so I got 3."
And she says, "I don't need any of them."
Yeah, it's like, you know what? End of the world. Everybody's gonna die if you don't pick something. 1, 2.
I'll take the dog. And so she just picks the dog.
like, oh, why did you pick the dog?
And then she's examining the dog back and forth, not really knowing what to do with it. And
brushing it against her face.
Yeah.
Feeling the texture of the fur.
Of the fur. And then, he says, why did you pick the dog? And she says, well, it's because the Major's brother once said that I was the Major's dog.
This is going to be a long car trip.
And he was just like, oh, boy. So, but eventually they get to the Evergarden residence, which is...
Along the way, they demonstrate how war-torn their country is. They could have taken the train.
Oh, yeah.
If a bridge hadn't been bombed.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing an iron bridge that was bombed, and so there's going to take extensive repairs to repair the train track through there. So that's just, a lot more showing about how the country has been victim of terrible war.
Yeah.
And then he talks about how they could have made it in a day if the trains were still running, but now it's going to be 3 days to make it to where they're going.
Yep, and so they get to where they need to get, they get to the Evergarden residence,
yes.
Which is, according to the Lieutenant Colonel, the Major's closest living relatives, which is why they're entrusting Violet to them, and they lost a son in the war.
Yes.
And as they're meeting with Violet, they're drinking some tea, and Violet tries to hold up the tea, and her hand is just shaking, and then
they have these transparent glass teacups.
These really beautiful looking transparent teacups.
And I want to say, was it a diffuser or there was a rose shaped?
It was an
flotation device.
It was a flower. It was an actual flower in there.
It was an actual flower in there?
The reason I knew it was an actual flower is because I watched it the second time, and we'll get to it. But she's holding up the cup, and she's shaking the cup really badly, and then Miss Evergarden, the elderly woman who's the head of the household, she says, "Oh, don't push yourself if you can't do that," thinking that she's shell shocked or something, and she's not able to do, and she's just got shaky hands. Well, she drops the glass and spills the tea all over her hand, and the servants immediately go up and try to clean it off. She's like, "No, it's fine. I don't feel heat." And she says, "No, but still, it's gonna do damage to you." And then, as that's happening, Violet takes off the bandage for the first time, and we see, and she says, "It's all right. It's made of adamantine silver," and she sews her new hand, and it's a robotic hand.
Yeah.
And it's the first time we've seen her new hands. I mean, anybody who's seen the trailers and stuff know that she's got those robotic hands, but it's the first time we've seen them in show.
Right.
But she, what's the, but anyways, the reason I know that it's a flower is because it cuts down and it shows the tea and the glass spilled, and then we see the flower out there, and there's some petals that have been knocked off of it. So it's an actual flower.
Okay. I was surprised to hear that a flower was in hot tea, personally.
Have you never had rose tea?
I've not.
There was this place, I forget where it was. I forget what it was called, but it was a Mongolian restaurant down in Provo, and they made rose tea, and it was pretty much just hot water with rosebuds in it.
Oh, okay.
And you would just pour it into a glass, and it's delicious. Okay. Really, really good.
No, when I had rose tea described to me, I didn't realize it was hot. I thought it was something cold like lemonade that just infused through cold water transfer.
No.
So, it's hot, so
maybe. So,
but being tea, it makes more sense that it's hot.
Yeah. But no, I've had rose tea a couple of times, and it's really, really good.
Okay.
So, but yeah. So after she's revealed her hands, Lady Evergarden gives her a pair of leather gloves that she had when she was a child. And she takes the gloves. And I forget what leads to the conversation, but she puts the gloves on, and they show her to her room and stuff, and Violet just very, very...
Dispassionately?
Dispassionately, I was going to say calculatingly. Just because she's not a rude person. She's not... She's just calculating. She's very logical. She's a soldier.
She was never trained in the etiquette of civility. And so she'll say or do things that are direct and to the point and not necessarily the nicest way of expressing it.
And she just flat out says, I'm not going to replace your son.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it's like it's not possible for me to replace your son.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking that must be why they've taken her in, because they're hoping to replace their son.
Right.
As the lieutenant colonel is about to leave, though, she goes out. Violet goes out to meet him, and she instantly says, and she starts asking for the colonel again, and she starts asking, why has the colonel abandoned me?
Yeah.
Like, I need my orders. I need to know what to do. And then Lieutenant Colonel said, or why does the major abandon me? Yeah. And then Hodgins says, the war's over. That's why you haven't gotten any more orders. And she's like, oh, so I've been cast aside. Well, if that's the case, please don't leave me here. Please just throw me away.
Throw me away somewhere.
Just throw me away.
Yeah.
Because I have no more use. I'm the major's tool, and if there's nothing for me to do for the major, then I have no use. Just throw me away. That's how she sees herself. Mm-hmm. And he goes over and he grabs her and takes her to his company. She keeps calling him Sir and Lieutenant Colonel and stuff like that, and he says, "Stop! Don't call me that." She says, "What should I call you?" And he says, "Oh, you can call me President."
Because he's the president of his company.
Because he's the president of his company, and his company, turns out, in this day and age, not everybody can write. So it's become, and the typewriter is a fairly new invention. Mm-hmm. So it's become very popular and a very lucrative business opportunity to hire women to write letters for people. So people go and they dictate these letters.
And so his staff is divided up into two categories. He's got the letter writers, and then he's also a delivery service for those letters.
Yep. So, and then like the first floor is like reception and stuff like that, where people go and they pay for packages and things to be delivered. And then second floor, they kind of show the businesses were going through the building. But she gets brought up to help in the mailroom. Mm-hmm. And he says, "You have a purpose. Like, don't ever say that again. You have a purpose. So here, just go ahead and work for me now."
Yeah.
And so he puts him in the mailroom, and she meets
Benedict
Blue, who is quite the character and is obviously a friend from Hodgins' past.
And he's an honest young man.
Yes. He, as opposed to Violet, who has the excuse that she just never learned, Benedict's just a punk. So, Benedict is just a punk. But he says she's going to be Hodgins says Violet is going to be helping you here in the mailroom, so show her the ropes.
Yes.
And so we have a pretty cute little scene where he gives her a uniform and she starts changing into it right in front of him, because she's in the military. She doesn't think about things like that.
Right.
And he gets embarrassed and tells her to stop. And then we see that she's in the uniform and it's too big for her. And this is something that has kind of just struck me odd, but they keep talking about her as being a child. Mm-hmm. And I guess physically speaking, she is shorter than everybody around her and nowhere near as developed as some of the women are.
Right.
But her face, and this could just be the character design, and it could very well be the intent that they gave her a very adult-looking face because of what she's lived through and what she's been through.
Right.
So I keep needing to remind myself that she's younger than everybody else. Because they keep talking about her as being a child and how she hasn't grown up yet. And I actually looked it up online. I wasn't able to find a proper age for her.
Right.
They just keep calling her young. But anyways, he then shows her the ropes and says, "This is how you organize things. The break room's over there. Make sure you take your break at the proper time. Let me know if you need anything. I'm going to go ahead and get to work." And so she says, "Okay." And he leaves, and he comes, and then we see a montage, or not a montage, but just a shot of the sun crossing the sky, getting to the sunset. And he comes back in after having made deliveries for the day, and she's in there completely done, having organized these piles of letters and put them in the proper boxes and stuff. And he's like, "Did you take a break?" He's like, "No, I didn't need one." What should I do now? And he's like, "Well, maybe we should start you on deliveries." Just kind of a casual thought. Maybe we should start you on deliveries. And that night, Hodgins is coming back from a meeting that he had with a guild meeting.
And he was in a horse-drawn carriage. I remember the clip-clop of the horse pulling him.
And he's just like, what's going on? He's just like,
oh, so now there's businesses out there that do midnight deliveries?
He's like, oh, I guess there's some businesses out there that do night deliveries too. It's I couldn't afford doing that though. And then he's like, I wonder what business that is. And as the cart turns, he sees his company's logo on the side of the cart, and he runs up and he asks her what she's doing. She's like, oh, I was told to do deliveries. And then we cut to dinner at, I believe it's Hodgen's place with Benedict and Violet. And he just says, and they're treating each other out, obviously old friends and stuff like that, bantering back and forth. But Benedict is just like, I intended for her to do it tomorrow morning. I didn't think she was going to keep going.
Yeah.
And that kind of gave me a thought,
If she's recovering,
like she's been in bed rest for 4 months.
And she says she's not at full strength yet.
And she's still not at full strength. Yeah. So what is her full strength at? She works all day on her feet. Mm-hmm. Without a break. Eating very little, as we discover. She doesn't eat very much.
Yeah.
And then she goes out and she's pushing this cart that's 5 times her size through the streets.
Yeah, it's
making deliveries. It's a hand cart.
It's a hand cart full of papers.
Yeah.
Paper's some of the heaviest stuff once you pile it up.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's doing it like it's nothing. And yeah, so what's her full strength like?
No kidding.
Anyways, yeah, so that's something that crossed my mind when that scene came. But the next day she's at work and she's cleaning the windows.
And she overhears what's her name? Katlia,
yeah.
Yeah. Katlia,
well, what happens is somebody comes in and says, I'd like to write a letter. And she's like, okay. Or like, well,
yeah, they ask her.
Do you hear? No, the guy asks and says, well, I'm here. I'd like to write a letter. There's a girl in my hometown that somebody else has proposed to. And like, he takes his hat off and like, he crunches his hat in his chest.
Yeah. And it sounds like he's asking her specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Not realize, like, it wasn't, when that scene happened, I wasn't clear that is a service that their company provides.
Yeah, they hadn't shown that yet. They write letters. So they have him go upstairs, and she witnesses him talking about what he wants to kind of say in this letter. Mm-hmm. And Katlia, who's this exotic-looking, beautiful woman,
yes,
who we learn is their top employee and their number one requested employee for writing letters, and we learn why, especially in this scene. They are automated, or they are auto.
Yeah, she kind of has the aesthetic of I want to say Inara from Firefly. But she's got the long black flowy hair and wears red and a low cut. Mm-hmm.
Well, I say exotic because she's got dark skin, purple eyes. It's got that very exotic animated look.
She also, and it looks like, I want to say that her attire seems to have coins taped into or sewn into it, like you would expect from a stereotypical Middle Eastern period piece. Mm-hmm. So yeah, she's clearly not from the area compared to what everyone else is wearing.
But she is what is called an auto memory doll, and the reason, and that is somebody who writes letters, but it's not somebody who takes dictation to write a letter. Right. It's somebody who listens to the person who's talking and conveys the emotions of the things they really want to say into a letter. And this guy's talking about how, that she was the first person who was kind to her, and like his friend is the first person who was kind to him, and how he's got all these feelings bottled up and stuff like that, and he wants to express it. And as he's saying that, it transfers to Catalia's voice, and she's describing what's happened, and she's saying this is what he's feeling, and then we cut to Violet. And
so it's Catalina's voiceover and Violet's memories.
Mm-hmm. And Violet's memories, where we see her on the battlefield with the Major, where he's protecting her in combat, or she'll rush ahead to save him. Mm-hmm. And we see just how brutally efficient of a warrior she is on the battlefield. and it's very, very reminiscent of World War One, where it's just men fighting over these strips of dead land.
It was barren trench warfare. It was just definitely World War
One. Brutal, horrible stuff. But we see how, just how strong she really is in those scenes. And then we see her say, and then, I forget exactly what the line is, but at the end of it, we see the line, I've always, I love you, is what she says. Or is what Catalina interprets the guy as saying.
Yes.
And that clicks something in Violet. It's the first time we really see any sort of actual, emotion from her. And then
we come to find out later that it triggers a memory in her. Like that, those words. I know those words.
Yeah. And she goes, as soon as that flashback scene ends, she's in Hodgen's office, talking to him about about wanting to be an auto memory doll. And he's like, well, why do you want to do that? And then she flat out says, I want to understand what the words I love you mean. And it's revealed that and we see the reason, we don't see what happened, but we see the aftermath of what happened. And we see Violet standing in this dark alleyway. It's probably a sewer or something because it's covered. Well, it's covered, but it's also a stairwell. Yeah, it's a stairwell. Yeah, leading down. Something like that. And the first thing we see is her arm drop to the ground. Yeah. And she's just covered in blood. And she's armless. And she goes down and she just, in tears in her eyes, says, I'm not letting you die here. And she leans down and she bites into the Major's shirt to try to pick him up. Yes. And he's not missing any limbs, but he's not in good shape either. No, he's covered in blood and things are not good for him. And at that particular moment in time, the way she said, I want to know what I love you means. My mind went immediately back to that one scene from Sword Art Online Abridged when in episode 10 when Yue is talking to Asuka. Yui is talking to Asuka and Kirito about why she injected herself into their lives and how she wanted to know what love is. I wanted you to show me. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not watching this show with you because I may have punched you if you had stopped and and talked about that during that scene. Anyways, because this scene made me cry. Like it stirred up emotions inside of me and stuff. And I would have been very, very disgruntled with you had you decided to bring up that thought in front of me while that scene was happening. He says to her, go, I want you to live and be free. And the last words we see him say to her are, I love you. Yeah. He says that to her. And that's the end of the episode. And the end of the episode is she reveals that that's her reason for wanting to be an auto memory doll. And it cuts to Hodgins saying, so you want to be an auto memory doll so you can learn what that means. Usually women who know what that means are auto memory dolls. Yeah. But okay. And he lets her do it. And that's the end of the first episode. That is the end of the first episode. Then the next episode starts. The next episode starts with her wanting to learn and getting to know the girls who are involved there. And we meet the three girls. We meet Iris, who is a little hothead. We meet Erica, who's kind of this mousy, nerdy girl. Very, very quiet, keeps to herself. And then we learn more of Catalina. Yes. Or Catalea. We learn more about Catalea. And Catalea is a very, very friendly, kind woman. And it's pretty quickly revealed that she's their best auto memory doll. Because she reads people so well and then can also write passionate words. Whereas the other two are still quite novices. They're still pretty new. And they even reveal that Iris just kind of, just graduated from a class. She just barely passed her apprenticeship. So she's still pretty new. So the girls, a lot of them spend their time typing out, documentation or addresses or things like that for envelopes. Where Catalina, like, they get a lot of requests for Catalina to write letters.
Right.
But
they need to learn how to, spread the workload, because it can't all be on Catalina, because anytime that she's gone and they end up doing bad work.
Yeah.
Which comes up. But the next scene that I absolutely adored was watching Violet learn how to type.
Yeah, they bring out a typewriter and they start, they give her some exercises and say, okay, go ahead and just put your fingers where you would on a keyboard. They say the L and the F button, which is, I looked down at my keyboard when they said, I was like, yep, no, that's where your fingers go.
J and F, yes.
Yep. But you put your fingers there, and then she started typing, and letters started appearing and stuff on the paper.
And it's at that moment that she, for the first time, takes her gloves off in front of the girls, and they see that she has this automail hand.
And it's very, very interesting that she bites the gloves off.
Yes.
Up until a certain point, we never see her take the gloves off with her own hands. It's always bites, and that's something we'll talk about when we get to that scene when that happens. But I think there's a very solid reason for why. But again, she bites the gloves off as opposed to using them.
And it's very clear that she does that. She even bit to put them on.
Yeah, to put them on in the first place, she used her mouth to put them on.
Yes. Which makes me think that maybe the automail, these
automail.
Yeah. Automail. Yeah. These robot arms don't have the tensile grip that, because she did drop the pen. I'm just wondering if these robot arms just don't have the tensile grip for.
I think there's a more symbolic reason behind it, and I will get to that when we get to the scene where she doesn't use her mouth to take off the gloves.
Okay.
But
that was what I assumed up to this point.
Okay.
But it was actually very interesting at watching her learn how to type, because what they show her doing is she starts learning how to do the typing and realizes that her fingers are not in the right place for what she needs to do. So she unbuttons her cuffs, rolls her sleeves up to her elbows, pops open a hatch on her elbow, and starts making adjustments from there that changes how the resting position of her fingers. And so we're watching her calibrate her arms for typing.
Yeah, which was really, really cool.
And then she proceeds to start typing at 200-300 words a minute, and these girls are like worrying about their jobs all of a sudden when they turn to him and say, "Can you type quietly?"
Catalina says, "Let's go ahead and have you type more quietly."
Yes. Because she was making quite a racket, but producing accurate documentation.
Yep, just super, super fast typing. And anybody who's used a typewriter knows that those things are not even really designed to be super fast.
No. No. Early typewriters had what was called a Dvorak key layout, but they were constant jams because a lot of the common letters were all categorized together. And so the QWERTY keyboard style nowadays wasn't to make people type slower, but was to separate the common letters out so that typewriters were less likely to jam.
Yeah.
And so that's just the traditional keyboard that now every keyboard you buy has that layout. So I'm curious. And because she said F and J, then we know that at least the subtitle translation for this show seems to think that it is a QWERTY keyboard layout.
It's a QWERTY keyboard layout, yeah. I'm pretty sure she said actually F and J in Japanese. I'll have to re-listen to the scene again. But yeah, and then like even if you like you can very clearly see like when we finally get the first time we see the opening credits in episode 3,
yes,
we see the name Violet Evergarden, and then we see it in English. We see it in their written language and then in English.
So they have some kind of written script, and I had this written down. I was really fascinated by it because some of the characters look Japanese and some of the characters look English, and many of the characters look like some hybrid in between. And so it's just a very interesting... It's almost as if they borrowed a letter that looked like a letter from a lot of European or Eastern or even all over Asia. Russian. I think some letters look a little Russian to me.
Yeah.
But all of it just seemed close enough that it looks English.
Well, yeah, it looks like a written language as opposed to just scribbles on a page.
Yes.
But anyways,
which makes sense for them to do if they're doing so much work with typewriter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we then see kind of throughout the day, people coming and going and asking for letters and stuff. And she's, and Violet is Violet, where, one customer, comes in and, Violet says, "Oh, that's not spelled properly. You know,
you made a mistake.
Or you made a mistake there." And she's like, "Ah!" And she says that to the hothead. She says that to Iris. And at the same time, this guy's like, "But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try to pay back as much of this debt as I can, bit by bit. I'm paying a bit each month." And then Violet just says to him, "You're only paying that much each month. That's going to take you 120 years to pay off your debt. Are you going to be all right to pay that off?"
Yeah.
And then we get to another scene where there's this woman who, from what it sounds like, has been abusing this child of relative or something, and she's like broken up about it. I think this is actually Erica who's writing the letter out this time. I could be wrong. And then Violet just says to her, "Could you please stop crying? It makes it harder for us to do our jobs." You know? And then we see what you wrote down as one of your favorite bits. This guy refuses to pay.
Yes, so they write the letter, and then he reads back the letter, and he's deeply offended that, how dare you write this as though it were my fault? I'm not paying for this. And then Violet gets up and politely reminds him
and says
that
it's illegal to not pay for this job.
It's illegal to contract our services and not pay for it. And then literally, she's saying it in the calmest, most rational discussion type voice, while getting up behind him, twisting his arm behind his back, and slamming him down on the table. Next thing we see is the boss saying, "So we've been getting a few complaints lately."
Well, but before that, before she pushes him on the table, before she strong arms him into pain, as it were, she even just says, "Could you please tell us what was wrong about the letter and we'll fix it?"
Yeah.
And she's trying to be, trying to say, look,
she's saying all the right customer service lines.
She is, but this guy's just, getting very, very upset and more upset, and he's threatening to leave, and finally she just pins him on the table and, pretty much says, "Let us help you fix it,"
Yes.
So.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And then the very next scene is just a cut to, excuse me, it's just a cut to Hodgins, and he's just like, "So we've been getting lots of customer complaints recently."
The way he delicately he delicately presents this information.
But then we get a scene that really, really,
that really demonstrates Violet's incapacity.
Yeah, how bad she is at this. We get this woman who comes in. She's a very attractive woman. She's hoping for Catalin, or Cattleya. Cattleya, however it's pronounced. I'll just say Cattleya from now on because that's how I have it written down. But Cattleya, she wants to use Cattleya, but Cattleya's on a business trip, and so the only person who's available is Erica, the little mousy girl, and
by the way, they don't mention it in any of the episodes, but I looked up in their wiki to get their information. Cattleya's last name is Baudelaire.
Yeah,
as in the Baudelaires from a series of unfortunate events.
Yeah, they have not. Yeah, they never said her name was Baudelaire, but this is based off of the light novel series. So I wouldn't be surprised if they got her name from the light novels.
Okay,
but yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh dear. Fortunately, she's not one of those Baudelaire orphans. But anyways, she's
a distant ancestor.
Anyways, this well-off woman comes in, and she's talking about how, I want you guys to write me a letter. There's this man. He's asked me out. He's starting his own automobile business. Honestly, I think I could do better. I'm not really into that kind of grunge stuff. But while she's saying that, she's twirling her hair. She's like she's showing all these signs that she's actually, into the guy. But what she says doesn't match what she shows. And Violet says, "Well, let me write the letter." And so they say,
"Well, what happens is, Erica is the one taking is the one receiving this information. When Violet steps out from behind a partition and shows herself, and then the customer asks, "Are you going to be the one writing the letter?" In a way, she meant it inquisitively, but Violet takes it as an order and salutes and says, "Yes, ma'am."
Yes, I'll do it. And she writes this letter, and the very next scene we see this woman is back in the office in tears, furious, and she hands him the letter, and Violet wrote this letter that's incredibly rude. It's it's pretty much saying you're below me.
Send more gifts and money.
Yeah, send more gifts and money, pretty much. Which is what the woman was saying, and the woman is in tears saying, "I wanted to enjoy the chase. I wanted to date this man. I wanted to marry him eventually, But a woman's supposed to let a man chase her. And Violet had no idea about that stuff. No. And so Catalina apologizes for it, goes and tries to fix things. And then we see, after that scene, we see Violet walking through the street. And
in the rain.
No, it's not the rain just yet.
Not the rain just yet? Okay.
No. We see this happened at some point in this episode, because this is also the episode where I saw the high heels. But she,
yeah, the rain happens closer to the end.
Yeah, she is walking through the streets and she sees who she thinks is the Major from behind. It's the same build, same blue hair. And she runs after him, and this is the first time we've seen her out of breath in this entire show. Right. It's the first time we've seen her out of breath is chasing after this guy. And it turns around and it's not the Major. It's an older, much older man.
Basically all she had to go on was that he was wearing a uniform and he had a military style, well, a bit disheveled, black haircut.
But anyway,
and so it looked like him from behind, but then he turned around and he's clearly way too old to be the man she thought he was.
But she,
now, was it in the very first scene? I think it was the very first scene where she's talking about, the, she looked at the gemstone, the brooch, and she said something to the effect of, "What is this feeling that I get when I look at it?"
It's the very first scene.
That was the very first
scene. First scene. She says, "I don't know, but there's something going on here when I look at it, Yeah. And she tells the Major that that it's the color of his eyes.
Yes.
One of the first things she says about it is the color of the Major's eyes.
So I remember they go back to that scene a couple times.
Yeah.
So.
And every once in a while, and she'll go and put her hand over where the brooch should be.
Yes. She keeps the brooch just at the base of her neck.
Before all that happens, though, we see some flirting happening between, mostly coming from Catalina to Lieutenant Colonel.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. She and the Major, not the Major General, she and Lieutenant Colonel are in the hall talking. And then suddenly, Benedict walks out. She eyes Benedict and instantly embraces the Lieutenant Colonel, Hodgins, and starts talking to him about stuff that's obviously very, very embarrassing to Hodgins.
Hodgins' first name comes up in this scene. Where she reveals what his first name is. Which is Claudia
Hodgins,
his name is Claudia.
Which is why it's CH for the name of his the sigil for his company, CH.
Yes. Do you know how embarrassing it is to hear you to have to cry out a girl's name when I'm with you? something that.
Yep. So it's showing that those two are an item.
They were at least. They're probably still. Well, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she's coming on to him very strong, and he tells her, "I can't take you out. I might not even get paid this month."
And
Benedict
overhears that, but Benedict also gets flustered about this relationship between those two, and he storms off.
Yes.
But so that was earlier in the episode. We forgot to cover that, and that covers what's happening in this next scene.
Yes.
The next scene, Benedict actually comes up on his motorcycle. And I didn't catch this the first time, but the second time I watched, because I watched these episodes once a couple days ago, and then I rewatched them to try to get more detail and more stuff, just because there's so much stuff going on.
It's very dense. It's very show don't tell, so it's a lot of dense information being filled in everywhere.
And he's wearing high heels on his motorcycle.
Yes.
And I, being kind of a history nerd, I loved that. I loved that so much because high heels were made for men back in the day to help them stay in their stirrups, to help their feet stay, in
the stirrups.
In the stirrups.
While horseback riding. And early motorcycles were built with that fashion in mind. And so your footrest was a bar, like a stirrup.
Mm-hmm. So he had heels on for riding his motorcycle, which is what you would have.
Yes.
So I was like, wow, that's really, really cool that they have him in heels. But anyways, he's talking to her, asking what's going on, and she just said, she screwed up. And he says, you might want to find a new. How about you come back to the mailroom? And she's like, no, I want to stay where I'm at. He says, well, I'm probably going to be looking for a new job myself, because apparently the company's not doing so well. Hodgins isn't going to get paid this month, and so then he just drives off, and that's when the rain starts.
Yes,
that's when the rain starts. And she's on her way back, and we see Erica looking at her through the window.
Through the window, and that's when she comes out. And they start talking in the rain. And she says, am I not suited for this work? No, you are not suited for this work.
Well, Violet says, am I not suited for this work? And then Erica, who's kind of surprised by the question because, people just aren't blunt like that. Erica starts saying something else and talking about herself.
I remember thinking about that about myself. I'm not talking about you.
Yeah, Violet just says, I didn't ask about you. Again, not rude. In her eyes, rude to everybody else, but that's just her personality.
Yeah,
she says what's on her mind, and I didn't ask about you. She's from the military. She's very, very clear, clean cut. Well, as clean cut as military gets. But she's
as direct and to the point, and no him hawing around the topic,
and then
beating around the bush.
And then Erica just says, "Yeah, you're not cut out for this job."
And why are you even doing it?
Yeah, why are you doing it? Why do you want to do this job if you're not cut out for it?
And she says what she said to the Lieutenant Colonel earlier, which was, I want to know what the words I love you means. And it's at that moment that they have this amazing visual cue where the rain stops and the cloud sweeps by overhead and a slow panning of light covers both of their faces, and it's literally a visualization of dawning realization. And it's just, and I thought, you know what, little things like that, they're just great.
Yeah. No, it is great. And then after they have that conversation, they go back inside, and we overhear Iris talking to Hodgins, saying that she is terrible at this. She should not be, she's not cut out for this work. She shouldn't be a doll. She's driving away customers. We're just starting to take off with this business, and if word gets around that, we've got this horrible person with us, it's going to drive business away.
Yeah.
Hodgins is saying stuff like, well, I'm not going to fire her, no, she's here to stay.
He's about to say that when Erica bursts in.
Yeah, he's about to say something, and Erica bursts in and says, please don't fire her, let her remain as a doll. And that's when he says, I'm not going to fire her, she's going to stay. We're going to figure something out.
But Violet, who 2 minutes before was told by Erica, you are not suited for this work, says, interrupts Erica and says, "You said I wasn't suited for this work.
You're being contradictory.
This is a contradiction."
Yeah.
And Erica just looks up at her with a little bit of an eye twitch, like, "Why are you saying this now? I've just changed my mind about you. Can't you read the situation?"
No, she can't. That's not what she does. And this is when we get, we see why Erik is not going to be paid this month.
Yes.
And that's because
Claudia.
Claudia.
The Lieutenant Colonel
Hodgins tracked
President
down...
Hodgins
tracked down the brooch.
Yes, he did.
And he spent his month's wages to buy it back because apparently some soldier found it in her belongings and sold it.
Sold it. It was somewhere on the black market, and he found it and collected it for her.
Which gives us a little bit of more information about Hodgins, that he has black market connections.
He does have black market connections.
So just that, but she gets it back, and she's as excited as Violet can be, which isn't very much. But she's very happy to have it back.
Yeah.
And then we get a bit more story for Erica. As she's walking home that night, she's saying to herself, "Oh, I stuck up for her because she reminded me of why I wanted to become a doll."
Yes.
And she reveals some backstory where the reason they're called automated auto memory dolls is because a famous inventor, the man who pretty much invented the printing press in this world, his wife was a novelist who was going blind. And he wanted his beloved wife to be able to continue telling stories. So he made this machine, which ended up being the prototype for typewriters, where his wife would still be able to write stories with it without being able to see.
Yeah.
And that first device was called Auto Memory Doll. And so from that point on, the women who would write letters for others who were not able to write for themselves are called Auto Memory Dolls. And she wants to convey the love of others through her work the same way that she felt the love that the wife had for her husband through her novels.
Yes.
And that's kind of where that episode... Well, the episode kind of ends with a shot of Violet in bed, examining the brooch.
Yeah, and so that gives us the first taste, and episode 3 continues it on, where we kind of get to see inside the minds of other people that Violet is influenced.
Yeah.
And so we kind of get to know Violet a bit more through the people who meet her.
And in episode 3, as we're already on the subject, they send her to a school that trains women to be auto memory dolls.
Yes.
And you can be an auto memory doll without going to this school. They say that numerous times, but this school is
the school is
renowned.
prestigious.
It's prestigious.
So
it's renowned.
If you have a degree from this school, you are better than most dolls.
And they show it by it's a pin that you get.
And it's a really cool looking pin, because what it is it's this semicircle C, the bottom of which has this has a couple of wings on it, but the top of it is 2 typewriter keys. And so, just a very interesting little symbol.
But yeah, so she joins this school with these other girls, and she sits next to a girl who's late on her first day, by the name of Luculia? Yeah, Luculia. Luculia. And she's this, redheaded girl, pretty, dainty, freckled. She's very, very nice.
I don't know if I can ever say that I've seen freckles that detailed on an anime character before.
Well, if this technology becomes prevalent, we might see a lot more of it.
Yes.
And Kyoto Animation did some amazing stuff with it, so hopefully we'll see more stuff done with it.
Right.
But anyways, did we skip over anything? I don't think that we did.
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We made it through episode 2. We're now in episode 3.
Yep. So, just a little bit more. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about Benedict and Catalia, because
so there's a scene where the two of them cross each other's paths in front of other people. That seems to be a key point, actually.
Yeah, well,
when they are in front of other people, they are fighting like cats and dogs.
Yeah, it's really, really funny because we see them angry at each other and then go going humph, and then like walking off. And as they're walking off, we see the people behind them who are actually there for the scene, the real focus of the scene. So every time they're around other people, they just they hate each other.
Right.
But when is it Violet that comes back that night?
Okay, so there's a scene. The first time we see what's going on between them is they blame each other for something that happened, and they storm off and are mad at each other. And then some of the employees say, "I wonder how the captain managed to put together a company with the two of them in it together."
Or how the president.
But yeah, there's a scene halfway through the episode where
Violet walks in on the two of them
having tea.
Yeah, having tea
politely,
and relaxed and having what seems to be a nice conversation. And then later on, during that same scene, one of them says something that triggers them into another argument again. So, how much of their argument is an act?
Given that they named him Benedict, and our particular affinity for Shakespeare, I'm wondering how much of it is an act.
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
Or Benedict and Baudelaire.
Benedict and Baudelaire. But anyways, that was a really, really funny scene. I really want to know. And you wrote that down, too.
I wrote that down. It's like, I want to know what happened between them.
What happened?
Which apparently, something that is said pretty late in episode 3, is that she's accusing him of having put a teacup and leaving a water stain on a letter she had typed up for a client.
That's the scene. That's this scene where they were having tea really, really nicely, and then she brings that up, and then he...
you put the paper there! This wasn't my fault!
Yeah, you put the paper underneath my teacup! So, something like that, yeah. But anyways, so now we get to the school, and the teacher
But I want to believe that is not the end of the story.
Oh, no, I doubt it.
We're going to watch more of this show, and it's going to...
It's going to escalate.
Reveal some more.
It's going to reveal more. But the teacher, they never actually say what her name is in the show. It is on the wiki, but I didn't bother writing down what her name was. They just call her instructor.
Yes.
But she she introduces class, and then as soon as they
and her character design, she is a very severe matron.
Yes. But one of the things I really like about her, real fast, we learn how severe or how strict she is by saying to Luculia, who's late on her first day, she says, "One more tardy and you'll be absent."
One more tardy counts as an absence.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And she just says, "Yes, ma'am," and then she just goes right back into it. And she is incredible. She's stern. She's very, very stern, which we learn from Iris, that the headmaster or the mistress, the instructor, is stern.
And likes to get kids in trouble. Then again, you meet Iris and you realize she is the kind of person who gets herself into trouble.
Yeah. Well, and throughout the episode, we never see this headmistress, or, she's not the headmistress, but the instructor. We never see her yell at anybody. We never see her belittle anybody.
No.
And that's something that I really, really liked about her, because you could have very easily taken a character like that and, turned her into the atypical trope where, the power-hungry teacher who, I'm the one who stands between you and your goal, so you have to do everything I tell you to. I'm going to go ahead and, nitpick everything that you do to make yourself feel bad. Whereas at the very beginning, she just says, "Look, you can become." First thing she says is, "Look, you can become a
doll
without this school.
Yeah.
But if you go through this school, you will become one of the best, most renowned dolls in the country."
Yes.
And no, she's never mean to any of the students. She's stern with them, but she's never mean. And I really like that they did that.
She is not callous in any manner, but she is, you can tell that she's no nonsense. She will speak her mind, and she will tell you what you're doing wrong. Because she wants graduates, but she wants graduates who want it bad enough to do the things they're supposed to do.
And so we have kind of, I don't want to say a montage, but a lot of short scenes rather than a montage of Violet and Luculia's education, where they learn grammar and grammar is sentence structure, but they learn vocabulary and stuff like that. And Violet keeps getting perfect scores on these tests.
On everything technical.
She gets a perfect score.
And we keep seeing Luculia's. We keep seeing her kind of side glancing over at Violet over and over again on every topic, seeing, okay, how can I compete with this? Because this is something that you clearly see the passion in her eyes that she needs this job. She needs the kind of jobs that this can provide for her, and we find out why later. But that she needs this pretty badly. And so instead of begging the teacher to be lenient, she's learning from her own classmates how to be the best. And so she's trying to emulate. It's clear she's trying and failing, but doing pretty well to emulate Violet's success on the technical aspects of things.
But eventually we get to where they're typing, and everyone starts typing except for Violet. And the teacher says, "Violet, why haven't you started typing?" And Violet just says, "You didn't say how fast you want me to type." And the teacher just goes, "Okay, give me 200 characters per minute." And Violet just says, "Affirmative." And she takes off her gloves again by biting them off of her hands. And all this is the first time the girls see her metallic hands. And she just goes, and all the girls get super worried, like, how on earth are we going to compete with that, So
200 characters per minute.
Yeah, it's not 200 words per minute. No. That's actually impossible. Well, on a typewriter, it's impossible.
On a typewriter of that type, yeah.
I mean, we're judging their typewriters, but they obviously have the technology to create hands. So...
yeah,
anime logic for you, ladies and gentlemen, right there. Anime logic. Whatever.
Well, they've had automail for centuries at this point.
Passed down the Evergarden family for generations.
Yes.
Anyways,
as great it would be to see an Armstrong cameo in this somewhere.
And we see, Luculia trying to become friends with Violet, like offering her lunch and stuff. When Violet just says, "Oh, I was trained to survive off of very little food while I was on a mission, So it's okay, I don't need it." And then they're walking home together one day, and we see Luculia. We see her, saying, "Oh, my home's over here," and then we see her brother drunk, getting kicked out of a bar.
Yes.
And then we start on a crutch, and we see some of her home life. We see her come home with food, saying, "I'm going to prepare dinner now," when her brother's already passed out on the couch, having eaten.
He took a bite out of the tomato, a bite out of a piece of bread, half a loaf of bread, a baguette, half a baguette of bread, and then and having emptied another bottle, and he's just drunk, pass out on the couch.
Yep. And then we get to a part of the episode where they are starting to actually write letters. Yes. And she and Violet are facing each other, and she says, "Well, how about we go ahead and start with you?" And Violet, "Well, who do you want to write a letter to?" And Violet is just like,
she's about to say my brother, and then stops herself halfway through and says, "My parents."
Well, it was Luculia offers her to write first. And she's like, "Oh, I have no idea who I'd want to write to." And then the instructor says, "You want go ahead and just a letter of who you want to have, send a letter to someone who you're close to, someone who you want to talk to." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And then she proceeds to give a military report
addressed to the major.
Addressed to the major.
Oh, was it the major or was it the lieutenant colonel? It was the lieutenant
colonel.
colonel.
Oh, that's right. The lieutenant colonel.
That she sent a...
Yeah, it's the lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, because she's struggling with what to say to the major.
Yeah, she doesn't know what to say to the major, but she knows what to report to the lieutenant colonel.
That's right.
So she... so after that, it's now Violet's turn to do the typing. Lucutia is about to say a letter to her brother, but then she decides to go ahead and say it to her parents. And it's this very, very simple letter about, I'm fine, things are going well here. The places that we wanted to go to together, I haven't had a chance to see yet. I hope to see you soon. Love your daughter, love Lucutia. And
the headmistress grabs the
comes over, letter. Takes the letter because she's obviously very interested in what Violet has written. And
because up to this point, Violet has gotten straight A's on every other assignment, and they're all technical assignments, all typing speeds, grammar, and execution. But the ability to print is not the same as the ability to make art.
And so she says, Violet, read this letter. And Violet reads it, and it reads as a military communique. You know, it's very, very, very straightforward. It's like, no
news on this topic, nothing to report. All is well here.
Yeah. And she just flat out says what you wrote is not a letter.
And it's completely true. And what Lucutia doesn't know is that this is Violet's problem. This is what Violet needs to overcome. This is her current character flaw that she needs to overcome. And so Lucutia is all apologetic, and I must not have been clear enough. It must be my fault somehow that this is the way that things happened.
Yep.
And so she's hyper apologetic and trying to make things, trying to smooth things over with the teacher, and the teacher's having none of it because the teacher knows that each of the students has their own thing that they have to do, and if you can't, even if your client is unable to adequately express themselves as a doll, you're supposed to tell anyway. And that's the whole reason she was at the school to begin with, was she's awful at reading people.
But and so the next scene we see is graduation, and all but 3 of the girls get their pin. There's a couple of girls who failed as well. Violet is one of the girls who failed, even though she got straight A's. But it's also revealed, like, of the girls who did succeed.
Of the girls who did succeed, who was the top in the class?
Well, no, I don't think it was of the girls who did succeed. I think it's implied that she is the top of the class. So she was able to overcome everything and become top of the class. Luculia is the top of the class. And
a side statement was, so where are you going to work? I'm like, I haven't even thought about that yet.
And so you're the top of the class and you don't know where you're going to work yet? So, yeah. And then Violet goes home that night.
And they don't actually cover where she's going to end up working throughout this episode, but I do kind of hope to see more of her in future episodes. Maybe she'll join the
Maybe
crew.
I don't know. I say as somebody who read the wiki, but no, it's fine. Anyways, Violet goes home that night and reports to the colonel that she failed her mission, and the colonel's like, "It's okay, you didn't need that anyways, And the next day, she goes back to the classroom, and Luculia is there waiting for her and said, "Oh, I was hoping that you were here. I wanted to see you again."
Yep.
During all of this, before they failed and everything, Luculia tries to become closer friends with Violet, and she takes Violet to what she says is the best view in the city. And it's revealed that her brother took her there. When they were younger. And it's also revealed in that same scene that the major, we see a bit of a flashback that the major says said, "I hope to show you the best view in the city, in that city at some point." And then Violet gets to see it, and she knows that that's what the major wanted to show her. But we get back there, and Violet, we get back to the school, and Luculia is still determined to help Violet become a doll. And so they pull out a typewriter, and she says, "Okay, let's go ahead and start here. How about you tell me about this major? Who do you want to write a letter to?" And the first word she says out of her mouth is major. And then after that, Violet can't think of anything to say. She has no clue what she wants to say.
There's a jump cut, which implies the passage of a long passage of time. And it's just Luculia sitting there with a sheepish, pitying smile on her face, going, "Anything? Can you think of anything to say?"
Well, and then she cuts, and then she says, "It's okay. I feel I'm actually the same." Violet says, "I can't think of anything to say to the major," and Luculia says, "Actually, I'm the same. I want to talk to my brother, but I have no idea what to say to him." And then she reveals that her brother was recruited into the war, or was drafted into the war when it first started. But he was posted in an area where there was no fighting. So to them, the war was just like this, this other world type thing. It wasn't even happening to them. And while this is happening, we see the brother, he's become a cripple because of the fighting, because of the war. And he tries to get up off of the couch, and he falls over while some booze, hits him, and we see just his depressed face. And we learn that their parents, who ran a business, went to go do some business in a major city, and that major city ended up being attacked, and they never found their parents. So their parents were presumed dead.
No trace of them.
There was no trace of them. And so the son blames the death of the parents on himself, and that's why he drinks. And so he went to the bar, and he's trying to get some drinks.
He drinks and he brawls.
Yeah, he got into a huge fight with a bunch of people, and he actually held his own fairly well, considering he was crippled and outnumbered 5-1.
Yeah.
He actually did fairly well, I felt. It must be that soldier's training, I guess. But we then see, and she's explaining and says, "I just want to tell him I'm so happy he's alive, because I have him still. I was so happy when he came home." And she just gets super embarrassed by telling Violet this, and gets up and runs out. And then Violet just thinks to herself, Violet just sits down and writes a letter. And she does, and this is when we see Violet for the very first time take her gloves off by using her hands instead of biting them. And that, to me, is a symbol of Violet really finally starting to become a full human. Because up until then, why did she pick the dog?
Because someone called her a dog once.
Because someone called her the major's dog. And what do dogs do? They pick things up with their mouths. And how often do we see her use her mouth as a tool to pick things up, or to put on or take off her gloves? All the time. And this is the first time where we see her, she's about to do it. She raises her hand to her mouth to bite off the glove. And then she stops, and she takes off the gloves with her hands. And then she goes and she starts typing. And the next thing we see the brother beat up on the street, underneath the tower,
the bell tower,
that shows the best view in the city.
Yes.
And he is about to, I honestly thought that he was feeling suicidal at that point. That's the vibe that I got from him, because he's beat up, he's bruised, but then he hears these footprints coming towards him.
Yeah, and a light's getting closer.
And there's a light getting closer, and he thinks that it's somebody to come here to finish the job.
Yeah.
And so he grabs his crutch and he swings it, but then Violet expertly blocks it.
With her metallic arm.
With her metallic arm, and she hands him a letter, and he says, "Who's this from?" And she says it's from Luculia. And he reads it, and it's just a very, very simple, short sentence that just says, "Dear brother, I'm so happy that you're alive, and love your sister."
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm getting teary-eyed just talking about it, because it's just a short, sweet, powerful scene, and I'm positive it saved her brother's life.
Yeah.
That one letter. And then the next day, she's back at the school again, and she's about to start her work, and then Luculia rushes in and embraces her, and she's so happy, and she takes her to meet the instructor at the school, and the instructor gives her pin, and she says, "This shows that you can be a doll. Yeah. This is a letter." And yeah, so
she gets her pin, and the episode ends with the sister. So there's major flashbacks happening. So before the parents were dead, while the children were young, the older brother was leading his sister up this massive flight of stairs to the top of the bell tower.
When they were both children.
When they're both children at sunset. So it's golden hour. It's this gorgeous yellow hues at sunset. It's just beautiful. They can see the whole city from the bell tower. The exact same time of day is repeated when, at the end of this episode, Luculia helps her crippled brother up those same 4 or 5 flights of wooden stairs up to the bell tower to see together again. And just, be together and heal as a family.
Yep.
And then it goes into more voiceover monologues as Luculia talks about what the kind of effect that Violet has been on her life. And so that's, so episode 2, it was Erica. Episode 3, it's Luculia. And I'm beginning to sense that there might be a recurring pattern moving forward that she's just going to affect the lives of more and more people.
Possibly, yeah. I know the next episode, she's apparently Iris gets caught up on something, and she goes to help Iris with it. Okay. So that was the synopsis for episode 4. Okay. But yeah, so final thoughts on Violet Evergarden?
I have heard that the show doesn't keep up what it's the promise of the first few episodes from other reviewers. I don't know. I can't testify to that myself. I hope it's not true. Some people just they dream up certain expectations of shows and don't let them deviate from their expectations. I think the show is absolutely gorgeous within the first 3 episodes. I think the premise is simple enough and heartfelt enough that it's absolutely wonderful what I've seen so far. And I'm definitely going to give the rest of the show a try.
I remember hearing from reviewers that it wasn't very good. But on Anime News Network, I mean, it's got an 8.6 out of 10.
Which is pretty high for a show. So I am very, very much looking forward to seeing where it goes. I'm trying to keep my expectations low for it. Not because I want to be, not because I'm expecting to be disappointed, but I find that if I let my expectations get too high, it almost never matters what actually is in the show. It won't meet my expectations for it. What I've seen so far, I love, and I really, really want to see the rest of it. So, yeah, so that's my final thoughts on the show. Me too.
Okay, so that's it for Violet Evergarden. Next week, what are we going to watch? It's your pick.
And this next week, we are going to be reviewing the first 3 episodes of Cells at Work. I've been seeing a whole ton of memes of this on Facebook, and it's just the new big thing that's come out with just adorable characters representing the different cells inside of our body. The artwork demonstrates the main character is a red blood cell who has this beret. Has a beret in the shape of a red blood cell.
She's a delivery girl.
She's a delivery girl, which is what red blood cells do. They deliver oxygen and nutrients to the cells in the body. And so she's a delivery girl, and she's accompanied by a guy all in white, except for when he's covered in the blood of his enemies, who is a white blood cell. And then there is just a collection of kindergarten-aged children who are the platelets.
Yep.
And and there's just memes all around that just adore.
I've already watched the first 3 episodes, but I stopped myself from watching it anymore because I knew we were going to be doing this for 3 episodes in at one point.
Yes.
So I'll just rewatch.
And I have not watched one not watched a single episode in anticipation of doing this.
I've already watched the first episode several times just because I've been introducing the show to people. But yeah.
Okay, the Crunchyroll synopsis reads, "This is a story about you. A tale about the inside of your body. According to a new study, the human body contains approximately 37 trillion cells. These cells are hard at work every day within a world that is your body. From the oxygen-carrying red blood cells to the bacteria-fighting white blood cells, get to know the unsung heroes and the drama that unfolds inside of you."
Well, I'm enjoying rewatching those first 3 episodes, so we can go ahead and talk about them next week.
So, how many times have you seen the first episode now?
Probably 3 or 4.
Okay. All right.
I just keep introducing it to people, and they're just like, "This show's amazing." I'm like, "I know, right?" So,
fantastic.
Okay. All right. Well, that's it for 3 episodes in. Let's move on to recommendation of the week.
All right, and this week it's my turn, and I'm recommending Princess Ghibli 1 and 2, the albums from Imaginary Flying Machines. Apparently, Imaginary Flying Machines, which is named after a Studio Ghibli short, what it is it's a handful of Japanese and European heavy metal bands who have collaborated on a studio album that takes theme songs from major Studio Ghibli releases and does heavy metal covers of them.
Yeah.
So you were the one who introduced this to me.
Yes, I was. I've introduced this to a lot of people, and it's not heavy metal. It's actually death metal, and which is a much heavier, more hardcore version of metal, and a lot faster too. And when people hear the phrase death metal, they think evil. Death metal isn't evil. A lot of death metal is actually like about they sing about mythology and Norse gods and things like that.
Sure.
They actually sing about really cool stuff. But one of the reasons it has the name death metal is because it's the form of music that has a very gravelly, growly, singing voice for it. It also has a style of singing called Beauty and the Beast, where you have a beautifully trained, professional, usually operatic female singer, and then the male grunt, growly, demonic sound, and they call that Beauty and the Beast.
Sure.
And when I first heard that they had done a death metal album covering Studio Ghibli music, I wanted to cry. I was like, why on earth would you do that? Why? And then I listened to one of the songs. And then I listened to another. Well, and then my curiosity got the best of me. So yeah, and then I listened to one of the songs, I listened to another, and then another. And before I knew it, I had bought the album. And have spread the word of that album to anybody who's willing to listen. It's awesome. It is so well done. Like, it is a massive love letter to Studio Ghibli. So, yeah, but this is your recommendation of the week, so why are you recommending it?
Well, I'm recommending it because it's just that good. You can listen to any of the songs on YouTube right now. But I do highly recommend you go out and buy the tracks and support the artists who created it. So, but I absolutely love the cover that they did. The album 1, Princess Ghibli. Track 12 is the Nausicaa Requiem.
That's a very, very good one.
It is just glorious.
My personal favorite is their death metal cover of the Japanese cover of Country Roads.
Like the John Denver Country Roads?
Yeah. I think it's in Whispers of the Heart. I forget. I could be wrong, but I know in one of the Ghibli movies, one of the ones that actually hasn't been released here in the States, unless it has, then I didn't hear about it. This little girl's asked to sing a song for some raccoons. And so she sings Country Road in Japanese. And so they do a death metal cover of the Japanese cover of Country Roads.
That sounds amazing.
It is amazing. You should listen to it. It's my favorite song on both albums.
Which album is it on?
The first one.
Is it? Okay.
I personally think the first one's stronger than the second one, but the second one's still pretty good.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, that's it for recommendation of the week. Unless there's something else you want to talk about it?
No.
All right, next then it's the creator shoutout, and this could have been news, but I wanted to go ahead and share it for the creator shoutout. But I want to go ahead and give a shout out to Concerned Ape, also known as Erik Barone. He is the man who single-handedly programmed all of Stardew Valley. If you don't know what Stardew Valley is, it is an indie version of Harvest Moon, and it is the best Harvest Moon game I've ever played. Really? It's incredible. The reason I'm bringing it up today is because as of today, August 1st, they have officially launched the multiplayer version of it, where you now have one player who owns the farm, and a bunch up to 4 buddies can join in as farmhands. And every single one of them can flirt with the potential people to marry in the game, and end up having families on your farm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's I played the beta of it, and today was the official release for the multiplayer. I've got his links for Twitter. He actually has a YouTube channel. I don't think he updates that very often, but also there's the link to his blog on StardewValley.net. And we'll go ahead and have those up on the site, but I just wanted to go ahead and give a shout out, kind of as a celebration to finally releasing the multiplayer patch for Stardew Valley, which you can play on the Switch, the PS4, the PC. I believe it's on Xbox One as well. But I have it for the PC and for the Switch.
Okay.
Okay, so that about wraps it up for us today, unless we forgot anything.
Nope, that covers it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening in this week. If you listened on YouTube, please feel free to like and subscribe our channel. Subscribe to our channel. If you like what we do and want to support us, please spread the word of our podcast or even support us on Patreon. And where can they find us on social media?
Well, our website has links to our social media pages on Facebook and Twitter, as well as our Patreon and YouTube pages. So if you just go to WhitakerWeekly.com, you can branch out from there.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's it for this week. I've been Andrew.
I've been Lee.
And you guys have a great week.